If you served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, or around burn pits, the PACT Act could mean thousands of dollars in benefits for you. But most veterans don't even know how to use it, and they definitely don't know what's been happening with it in 2025. I'm going to be breaking down exactly what the PACT Act is, who qualifies, and how to file your claim the right way so that you don't miss out. Let's get started. So, what does the PACT Act stand for? PACT, right? Well, funny enough, it stands for Honoring Our Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act of 2022. It is a federal law that was signed by President Biden in August 10 of 2022. The goal of the PACT Act was to expand VA healthcare and benefits for those exposed to toxic substances. So it represents the biggest VA benefits expansion in U.S. history. Now, it added 23 new presumptive conditions for burn pit exposure, including cancers and respiratory illnesses, and Agent Orange locations down the road, right? It's been expanded upon since it launched, too. This includes veterans from all wars, right? Vietnam, Korea, Gulf War, anything, you name it. It's not respective of the campaigns that you were in, but more so the locations and the exposures involved within them. An interesting fact about the PACT Act, too, is that surviving spouses and dependents may also qualify for benefits if a veteran passed due to a covered condition. So, it's a big point to know. The PACT Act ultimately gave the VA more benefits, and it removed barriers to getting VA benefits for veterans who were exposed to toxic substances. And we'll get into why that was such an issue in a minute. How did it come to be? Well, there was years of struggle. Veterans were exposed to toxic substances, especially from burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? If you served in the war on terror, you were near somewhere where shit was just getting burnt instead of thrown away or disposed of properly, and you were breathing it in. That's almost a 100% fact across the GWOT veteran group. Prior to this law, prior to the PACT Act, they faced high claim denial rates because there was no direct evidence, right? The VA wasn't accepting that, oh, you were near a burn pit, so it was the thing. We didn't even know to blame it on that at this point. The research wasn't out yet, and what research had been done, the VA hadn't accepted as their own. This led to a burn pit health crisis. Many post 9/11 veterans began developing lung diseases, cancers, and chronic illnesses at record rates, more than any generation in the past. But the VA still required direct proof to service connect the issue, which there was no way to get that direct proof. If you and the boys had GoPro videos, it definitely wasn't just of the burn pit existing there. Beyond that, though, there's Agent Orange gaps, right? Vietnam and Gulf War veterans faced massive issues, mainly the fact that there was locations like Thailand, Laos, and Guam that were not included in Agent Orange presumptive coverage, which was complete bullshit because Agent Orange was definitely stored and used in all of those locations. And even in places where it wasn't deployed to defoliate something, it was kept there and stored there as part of the war or post-war. So what was the massive shift that enabled for Congress to get a PACT Act passed? Comedian Jon Stewart, along with other organizations, brought national attention to the issue, and that pushed for legislative action. Lawmakers and medical experts got together, and they confirmed the link between toxic exposures and these severe health conditions. And then the pressure really started to mount, and the VA really needed to stop denying these claims. It got a massive amount of support, right? There was a bipartisan support for change. Both Republicans and Democrats agreed that something had to be done, which led to the drafting of the PACT Act. But public pressure and veteran protests ultimately are what brought this to a head. President Biden signed the PACT Act into law, and then he called it the most significant expansion of VA benefits in history. It expanded the number of veterans who qualified rapidly. If you had been denied a claim all these years for any of these cancers or any of the presumptive conditions that were in the PACT Act, overnight you could file an appeal and win your claim. That was powerful. The immediate impact was that the VA began processing new claims and reevaluating previously denied cases, even instituting a retroactive pay period, regardless of what your claim status had been. Now that period closed, I believe, in 2023, but no less, they did do that for a time, and it helped a lot of GWOT veterans get what they were actually owed. Right now, the VA's pretty much got this thing rolled out, but they do still have a dashboard tracker because they're trying to focus on getting PACT Act claims processed quicker than anything else, especially due to the nature of how those claims can go downhill for the veteran's health pretty quickly. The bottom line is that the PACT Act exists because veterans and veteran advocates fought back, right? After years of denial, this law now ensures that veterans who are exposed to toxic substances finally get the care and the benefits that they deserve. This is not a standalone instance, and my point with this is that we have to make our voices heard. We have to stick together. We have to fight the system. When the VA isn't doing the right thing, we have to make it known, and we're going to get bigger and louder and continually stronger when it comes to dealing with this. The PACT Act is a great example of that. Now, what effect does the PACT Act have in 2025? Times have changed. GWOT is quote-unquote over, and now, what are we doing? The PACT Act is still here. The expanded VA coverage still continues. The VA is accepting and processing new claims under the PACT Act. They've got this dashboard, like I mentioned earlier. We'll even show something here about it. but that dashboard is solely focused on showing their efficiency with the PACT Act. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, at the time of filming this, their efficiency is not that impressive, but it's the VA. So, of course, the PACT Act allowed more veterans to become able, supposedly faster VA processing times. I don't know that we've seen that on the company end, and I don't know that their own dashboard here is necessarily reflective of that, but that is their aim, is to continually get faster processing times, and hopefully they achieve that. Surviving spouses do still qualify. If a veteran passed away from a PACT Act condition, their family members can still apply for benefits in 2025. If you unfortunately know anyone that has happened to, any surviving spouses, that is a very relevant piece of the pie for them. There is still congressional oversight and adjustments that are going on. We're going to get into what some recent lawmakers have voted on when it comes to PACT Act here shortly. But before we do that, let's talk about what issues became presumptive under PACT Act, right? Now, this is a kind of long list, but I'm gonna read through it here lightly. So for cancers, there's brain cancer, gastrointestinal cancer, glioblastoma, head cancer, kidney cancer, lymphoma, Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's, melanoma, neck cancer, pancreatic cancer, reproductive cancer, respiratory cancer, any type including lung. Then when it comes to the lung diseases, right, these are the things that are presumptive: asthma, chronic bronchitis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, chronic rhinitis, chronic sinusitis, constrictive bronchiolitis, or obliterative bronchiolitis. The word obliterative does not sound fun whatsoever. But emphysema, granulomatous disease, I'm butchering that, interstitial lung disease, pulmonary fibrosis, and sarcoidosis. Now, what happened with the PACT Act and Agent Orange? Well, it added new locations and new presumptive conditions. So, presumptive locations and conditions. The new conditions for Agent Orange exposure were hypertension and monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. What that is, don't know. It doesn't sound fun, and if you do have it, it's now presumptive. The presumptive locations now are Thailand, which is all U.S. military bases in Thailand from 1962 to 1975, Laos from 1965 to 1973, Cambodia at Myanmar or Krek, 1969 to 1969, so apparently 1969 was a bad year to be in Cambodia for Agent Orange, Guam or American Samoa from 62 to 1980, Johnston Atoll from 72 to 2000, and I'm pretty sure that's like where they tested nukes. So you probably got some other shit going on too. If you glow in the dark, that might be a claim. We'll figure it out. But an example of how this helps the Vietnam vets, right, is a Vietnam vet stationed in Guam in 1973 developed hypertension, and it was denied because Guam wasn't covered. Now that hypertension for the non-vet that was in Guam in 73 is automatically approved and presumptive. So there's your superpower. Now let's talk about what PACT Act did for the Gulf War expansions, right? Well, it expanded upon Gulf War syndrome-related conditions, typically undiagnosed illnesses and neurological disorders. Now, if you don't know this, there's a crazy event that happened in the Gulf War that somehow just hasn't been talked about, but the U.S. Army blew up a weapons depot during the Gulf War that had sarin gas in it. Now, mind you, this is the desert. There's no trees, and so the wind took that sarin gas and spread it across all of those deployed troops. And they don't know in what direction. They don't know who was affected or who wasn't affected. And so it's the government's nice way of saying, hey, we accidentally exposed you to like the world's deadliest nerve agent. Here's a few $1,000s every month, right? That's essentially what Gulf War syndrome is doing. There's just no way of knowing who actually ingested it and how it affected each person differently. The PACT Act also expanded radiation exposure locations. Inuiatak Atoll cleanup from 1977 to 1980, Palomares, Spain nuclear accident from 1966, and the Thule, Greenland nuclear accident in 1968. If you're involved in any of those, your radiation exposure is now presumptive. That didn't make the news, and that's pretty interesting. But an example of how this would take effect, right, is an Air Force vet stationed at Inuiatak Atoll in 1979 was diagnosed with radiation-related cancer, and now their qualification was automatic, right? It was just presumptive. This makes a huge difference for those who are in these, at some point, obscure locations and the obscure missions, and apparently things that weren't very publicized either, or maybe even classified at the time. They now can get covered under these presumptive acts. So, it's 2025, politics are crazy, the world is crazy. What's going on with the PACT Act? Well, the Senate just recently rejected a protective amendment of the PACT Act. It makes you ask, why? Why would anybody be against this? The unfortunate political gamification that occurs in our country is what's happening once again. It's probably quite unlikely that 52 senators who opposed the PACT Act protection all opposed it because it's money to veterans. It's very probable that the 52 senators who opposed it because there was some language in the bill that was either not favorable, not American, not good, or something just completely unrelated and divisive among party lines. Do your own research, dig into that as you will, but that's what's going on. The Department of Veterans Affairs is also going through some budgetary measures, right? We all know that. There's planned contract cuts and subsequent pauses. The VA initially announced plans to cut $2 billion in contracts targeting what were described as non-essential consulting services. What was actually in those contracts? Of course, we don't know. And we don't know which ones in particular they're talking about cutting. Now, what we do know is that C&P examiners and the firms that run them are oftentimes just committing fraud. There are good C&P examiners out there who care and want to do the best by the veteran and get them an honest rating, but there's also the majority of raters, which I'm sure all of you have experienced, where you go in for 5 to 10 different disabilities. It's a scheduled meeting for a scheduled appointment for 2 to 3 hours, and it takes less than 1 hour and you're in and out. They're asking 1 or 2 questions about each thing, and unless you walk into that place like on fire or with some other insane amount of distress going on, they're just not going to give you the rating, or they're going to just BS and put something on their report. Now, why do they do that? Well, because they're the lowest bidder, right? When you go to a services type of agency or model with anything and you're looking for the lowest bidder, well, that's the kind of service you're going to get, and that's exactly what happens. When it comes to these contract cuts, I think there's great potential for the VA to slow down before things get a lot better. We have to cut the fat and determine what's broken before we can actually improve upon efficiency. That's with any company or business model, and that's probably what's going to happen with the VA. So if you want to file a claim, now is probably the optimal time to do so before all that shit hits the fan and claims start taking a good bit longer again. Right now, we're looking at sub 6-month claim completions, and hopefully I'm wrong, and this whole process of getting the VA to be more efficient doesn't involve a slowdown on the front end. Now, the impact on veterans. Since the enactment of the PACT Act, there's been a significant increase in the number of claims filed by veterans seeking benefits for conditions related to toxic exposures. The VA reported that as of January 2025, over 1.4 million PACT Act-related claims have been approved. 1.4 million. That reflects an approval rate of roughly 74.5%. If you felt discouraged with your VA claim, do know that the odds are in your favor now. And let's go on and talk about the expansion of presumptive conditions. This also happened just in 2025. It's been a busy year already. But in January 2025, the VA expanded the list of presumptive conditions under the PACT Act to include specific blood and bone marrow cancers, such as acute and chronic leukemias, multiple myelomas, myelodysplastic syndromes, and this expansion ultimately, it simplified the process for veterans who are affected by these cancers to receive benefits. So that's a pretty awesome thing. Let's take a moment and let's reflect. What have we learned? We learned what the PACT Act stands for, we learned why it was created, we learned what it does, and we learned what presumptive conditions are included under it, and presumptive locations. But now, let's talk about how to actually use the PACT Act. How do you use it, right? Well, you need to file a new claim or a supplemental claim if you've been previously denied. Some of the key components of this, right, are of course filing the claim. You need your records, you need your DD-214. If it's a supplemental claim, you don't necessarily need the DD-214, but if you're at one of these obscure locations that now has a presumptive location associated with it, that DD-214 is going to be your best way. Just straight referencing, look, it says I was here, your presumptive law says I was here, now I've got this condition. There we go. That's essentially all the nexus you need. If you don't know how to get your medical records or STRs from the military, then you can go to Vetclaims.ai, get in touch with my team, happy to point you in the right direction. It also can be as simple as going to the National Archives. All that being said, gather the right evidence. If you have private medical providers who have diagnosed you with something or treated you for something that is related to this PACT Act or that you want to claim on, go get that. Finally, the step is to file online at va.gov, whether you're doing this by yourself or you come through us. What you need to do is understand if you need to file a supplemental for something you were previously denied for, and that new evidence can be diagnosis, it can be a research letter, it can be any of those things, it can be a buddy statement, or if it's a flat-out new claim that you want to be covered under the PACT Act, then you do that. Of course, you're going to be attending the C&P exams at Vetclaims.ai. We're very happy and proud of the way that we mentor and coach our veterans on C&P exams. You get a one-on-one professional service here where you have one point of contact throughout your entire process with Vetclaims.ai. And if you need time to prep for a certain or specific C&P exam, you can do that. We also do produce a document that is incredibly thorough and tells you everything that they're going to be asking on the DBQ, so you know exactly what you're walking into on these C&P exam meetings. If you do not have that, if you're doing this by yourself, you need to research the schedule ratings, you need to understand the DBQ, You need to understand what that examiner is supposed to be looking for. And that's twofold, right? One, you need to know how to speak to the disability in question in a way that the VA will understand and relate. And two, you need to make sure that that exam is thorough. If you go to a CMP exam and they ask you 2 questions for mental health, do you think you're going to get the rating you deserve? No. And so you need to call the hotline, request a new CMP exam, and furthermore, that reports that examiner for being a turd, and it makes sure that future veterans aren't screwed over by them. That right there, folks, has been our video on the PACT Act. I hope that I added value. I hope I clarified some of your questions. Please like and subscribe and share this video. Drop a comment if you have any questions. We will reply to you. And as always, go to Vetclaims.ai to get the rating that you deserve. We're here for you.